और जीवन।
Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's get started with the headlines. US and China have reached a framework agreement on TikTok, aiming to shift the app to US-controlled ownership over national security concerns. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent described the talks as productive and confirmed President Trump will speak with Chinese President Xi on Friday to discuss wider trade and future negotiations. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio visiting Israel on Monday promises unwavering support amidst the Gaza war. He calls for the elimination of Hamas, saying Gaza needs a better future. Prime Minister Netanyahu also praises Rubio's visit as a strong message of US backing. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is warning Israel to be very careful in its actions against Qatar. He praises Doha as a great ally and describes Qatar's ruler as a wonderful person. Trump also urged the Gulf state to improve its public relations efforts. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Russian air defense systems have intercepted 6 Ukrainian drones over Belgorod region. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said that Ukrainian forces have advanced in border districts of northern Sumy region. Polish President Karol Nawrocki approves NATO troop deployment under Operation Eastern Sentry, as Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky warns Russia is testing NATO's eastern flank and offers to teach allies cost-effective counter-drone strategies to strengthen regional defense. Trilateral exercise Freedom Edge begins off Jeju as US and South Korea as well as Japan boost defense capabilities. North Korea condemns the drills as reckless show of strength, warns actions could bring negative consequences to participating nations. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called for Israel and Russia to be barred from international sports competitions until the barbarity ends. He questioned why Russia was expelled after invading Ukraine, but Israel remains active despite the war in Gaza. His comments come a day after pro-Palestinian protests forced the cancellation of the final stage of the La Vuelta cycling race. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's office has condemned Elon Musk for using dangerous and inflammatory language during a far-right rally. Musk had urged the dissolution of Parliament and the ouster of Starmer's government, warning crowds to fight back or die. Thousands of Palestinians are fleeing eastern areas of Gaza City, fearing an imminent Israeli ground offensive amidst relentless bombardment. Israel has said its plan to capture Gaza City, Hamas's last major urban stronghold, is key to defeating the group, but the move risks endangering hostages and displacing hundreds of thousands of already those uprooted by war. Israeli strikes have destroyed dozens of buildings and killed at least 16 people. According to Gaza health officials, the military has begun dropping leaflets ordering residents to move south while saying it will equip them with shelter materials. Prime Minister Netanyahu, backed by his right-wing allies, ordered the operation despite warnings from Israel's military leadership about the risks of urban warfare. Mediators from Egypt and Qatar are pushing for a ceasefire, warning this may be a final chance to halt the bloodshed.
صعب مواصلات صعب على الآخر ويعني فيش مصاري فيش دخل فيش شغل يعني هاي انا بدي اطلع من غزه بدي اطلع على الجنوب عشان ما اديش اتنقل واتريح نفسي انا يعني بدي اطلع على الجنوب عشان انا اتريح نفسيتي بديش انا انقل من شمال يمين بضلش يعني ما ضلتش حياه يعني انت شايف كيف المعيشه غاليه فيش شغل إنه يعني سنه ونص قاعدين فيش شغل اشي صعب علينا صعب كثير
بدي اسافر بهاجر يفتحوا لنا المعابر خايفين من نخش بري يعني فاحنا طلعنا اخذنا شويه اغراض بدنا نروح على الجنوب لقينا مكان نقعد فيه ونأمن الآن.
بالنسبة للمناشير النزلة يعني بدهم إيانا ننزح، ليش ننزح؟ طب ما هو المكان ضرب، هان ضرب وفي الجنوب ضرب، الشهداء هان وشهداء هناك، يعني على الفاضي بس بنتعب حالنا وإيجارات، من وين نجيب إيجارات؟ من وين نجيب سيارات؟ مش موجود هذا كله، مش قادرين نطلع، إحنا خلص إحنا من الموت مش طالعين، إحنا
إنه يرحمونا اليوم في قمة عربية في الدوحة، انظروا لنا بعين الرحمة،
احنا الشعب يباد عن بكرة بهان إبادة جماعية يا اخوان، والله إبادة جماعية في قطاع غزة. انظر العالم، شو كيف العالم طلع، هذا العالم كله من الساعة 9 ومن الفجر في ناس، وفي ناس ناموا في الطرقات من شدة القصف.
Javier Abu Eid, political analyst, is joining us live from Ramallah. Javier, thank you for being with us on NewsX. Let me ask you about this, the fact that many Palestinians are now, in fact, moving out, even as this ground offensive is all set to begin. What are the latest reports that you are hearing on this ground offensive and its progress, even as, of course, mediation talks take a hit due to the strike that Israel did in Qatar?
Thank you, Dai. I think this last part you specified is very important because with the attack committed by Israel against the sovereignty of Qatar, at a moment that Hamas leaders were actually analyzing a proposal to have a ceasefire, it was a direct strike against the possibility of having a resumption of negotiations. And clearly, when Qatar is being attacked for being a mediator, there are no incentives to continue this mediation. But what's happening in Gaza City, Uday, it's beyond that people are moving out, people are being pushed out. What we are facing technically is a process of ethnic cleansing. And why using this term? It's not just forcible displacement. What Israeli ministers have been saying is that they want to turn Gaza City into something like Jabalia or Bet Hanun, which are two cities that basically are totally destroyed. And therefore, what the process that we're witnessing now in Gaza City is not one where an army is asking civilians to leave temporarily, but actually people know very well that if they leave, it will be very difficult for them to go back.
Absolutely. And of course, meanwhile, Javier, if we talk about the truce efforts, what's the latest update on that? Of course, they had taken a hit post that Israeli strike in Qatar, but do you believe those talks could resume soon?
This is a very important question. I personally don't have an answer, but I also believe that there are other answers that should be given by other powers, particularly the United States. I think President Trump cannot continue to play it both ways. On one side, allowing Israel to do whatever they want without facing any consequences, and on the other side, trying to appear as a friend of the Arab countries, particularly those in the Gulf. I think the Arab-Islamic summit that's taking place now in Qatar, it's a very important diplomatic response. We still have to wait for what is going to come out from this meeting, but you can sense a lot of anger and frustration from most Arab leaders. And I think it's very important because this is not going to shape only Arab Israeli or Arab American relations, but we're also talking about something that goes beyond, which is how the global South emphasizes how the relationship is going to be with other powers. And I think Palestine remains just as in 1947 and 1948, where, for example, Indian diplomacy was very keen on standing with the Palestinian people because of the understanding of what would happen to other nations as well. I think it's very keen for the future of those international relations.
Now, he's been warning about this for quite a while, but when do you believe that on-ground offensive will begin in full earnest?
I think as an analyst, Uday, I have utterly failed because I truly believe that Israel was not going to advance during September for one reason. We are right before the UN General Assembly inauguration in New York. And probably, I mean, if I were at the side of the US president, I would have at least requested Israel, that is receiving weapons and political support and money from the US, not to continue with this genocide as far as they are trying to do some diplomacy. But clearly, here what you have is a US administration that continues to allow Israel to do whatever they want. Perhaps President Trump is now telling the Israelis, you need to be a bit more careful. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that the decision to move into Gaza City, it will be an Israeli decision with US support whether the US likes it or not, but it's, again, US weaponry. And most importantly, Uday, I think it's very important to remember that what we are facing here is not a an Israeli leadership that acting in a rational way. The head of the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, the head of the army, they were against the attack in Qatar, and Netanyahu went ahead. And now it's clear that the Israeli army is not convinced with the argument to destroy Gaza City, but it's once again not a security issue, but a political decision.
All right, stay with us. In fact, we're getting more news now coming in as well. Leaders have gathered in Doha and they've sharply criticized Israel's actions in Gaza, calling them treacherous and cowardly. Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani has said the assault seeks to undermine peace efforts. Let's listen in to the Qatari Emir.
الحقيقة الثالثة التي بينا هذا الاعتداء الغادر على سيادتنا هو أن رئيس الحكومة الإسرائيلية الذي يتباهى بأنه غير وجه الشرق الأوسط في العامين الأخيرين يقصد فعلا أن تدخل إسرائيل في أي مكان شاءت ومتى شاءت. إنه يحلم أن تصبح المنطقة العربية منطقة نفوذ إسرائيلية وهذا وهم خطير.
The Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Hussein Brahim Taha has urged a united response to what he called heinous aggression. Arab League chief Ahmed Abul Ghait branded Israel a rogue state and demanded global outrage. This is what Ghait, the Secretary General of the Arab League, had to say.
لقد أدى الصمت على الإجرام والبربرية في غزة العامين كاملين إلى تعزيز تصور لدى قادة الاحتلال بأن كل فعل ممكن وكل جرم يمكن الإفلات به، فأخذوا ينشرون الدمار من بلد إلى بلد ويشعلون النيران في المنطقة كلها.
Iraq's Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani floated a NATO-style defensive pact for Arab and Islamic states, while Turkey's President Erdogan pressed for regional self-sufficiency. The summit continues with more leaders expected to speak as well. Javier Abu Aid, political analyst, is live with us on this story. How do you react to these statements coming forward from Doha on Israel's offensive?
I think it's clear that Israel has gone beyond any red lines. And I think some people believe that what they did in Gaza went beyond red lines, but still you have a bit more that were for Mr. Netanyahu and his government to continue to go beyond. Or as some Israeli opposition members would tell Mr. Netanyahu that there are no bridges left to be burned, as Mr. Netanyahu continues to attack, in this case, Qatar, which has been, we have to remember this, a key player when it comes to mediation efforts. And if there are any Israeli captives that are back home from Gaza, it's because of the efforts of Qatari diplomacy. So clearly what we are facing now in Doha, in this conference between Arab and Islamic countries, it's an attempt to have not just one single voice, but also to have concrete measures to be taken against Israel. And here there are a number of ideas that are being discussed as we speak in Doha. But once again, I think what's clear from the statements we hear is that no Arab country, no Islamic country from those who are speaking now in Doha is convinced that Israel is a partner for peace in this region. And of course, there will be a call on the US and other powers to take concrete measures against the way Israel is conducting, not just, not just to stop the genocide in Gaza, but also the way it's conducting its relations with the rest of the region.
All right, Javier Abu Aid, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective. US President Donald Trump has said a deal has been reached on what he called a certain company that young people wanted to save, widely seen as a reference to TikTok. Posting on Truth Social, Trump said a trade meeting between the US, China and the EU went very well and confirmed that he will speak with the Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent later clarified that Washington and Beijing have struck a framework deal allowing TikTok to shift to US-controlled ownership. Without it, the app will face shutdown in America as early as September 17th. Officials say the deadline could be briefly extended to finalize details, while broader negotiations on tariffs and technology rules are set to continue with another round of talks next month.
We have a framework for a TikTok deal. The two leaders, President Trump and Party Chair Xi, will speak on Friday to complete the deal, but we do have a framework for a deal with TikTok. The getting to this framework was made possible by President Trump and the high regard that President Trump has for Party Chair Xi. So when the leaders have mutual respect, then the delegations have mutual respect. And as Ambassador Greer said, we were in substantial contact with President Trump last night and then again today. We had very good discussions. We preferred to keep the discussions on TikTok. We will be holding trade negotiations in about a month again at a different location. But we talked about many things that we might do in the future. I think either the ambassador or myself want to get out ahead of the leaders. We're not going to talk about the commercial terms of the deal. It's between two private parties, but the commercial terms have been agreed upon.
Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist at Spartan Capital Securities, is joining us live from New York. Peter, there is now a phone call expected between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping on Friday. What do you expect in that phone conversation?
I think it'll be friendly, and I think that some deal is probably in the works. I think, it's obviously predicated with a deal for TikTok. And if they want to get that through, they're going to have to make some concessions to China and vice versa. And so I think the winds right now are favorable, that within the next month or so we can see a trade deal. And I think the conclusion of the TikTok situation is probably at hand. Now, there are other reasons to think that, and that's because, China continues to report some really worrisome economic data. The economy is losing steam. We saw that with the industrial production that was reported. And so the Chinese know they need to make a deal. The Americans know they need to make a deal. And I think it'll happen. It's just, a question of both sides giving up what they probably would like to have and reaching some mutual agreement.
Right. Peter, as far as now TikTok also is concerned, do you believe that it is pretty clear now from what Donald Trump and Marco Rubio has said that it will transfer to American ownership?
Based on what we're hearing from the press, based on what we're hearing from President Trump, based on what the possibilities are, I think that, there's a good possibility. I think that probably could happen very quickly. And based on that, it takes us back to what I said a few moments ago about a trade deal.
Okay. Stay with us. In fact, we are getting some more news now coming in as well. India will be hosting U.S. Chief Negotiator Brendan Lynch in New Delhi on the 16th of September for one-day trade talks with Indian counterpart Rajesh Agarwal. The meeting follows President Donald Trump's recently softened tone after slapping 25% punitive tariffs on Indian exports last month, which doubled total duties to 50%. India's exports to the U.S. have already slipped, dropping to $6.86 billion in August from $8.01 billion in July. The talks come amidst tensions over India's purchases of Russian oil and its closer engagement with China and Russia, but both sides remain optimistic that a deal is within reach. Peter Cardillo is still live with us on this story. Peter, India is all set to host the U.S. trade representative, in fact, later this month. How optimistic are you that we could move forward on a trade deal between India and the U.S.?
I'm very optimistic that a deal will be struck with India. I've said this in the past. I'm going to say it again. We saw some sort of friction there between India's Prime Minister and President Trump, and now that seems to be reversing again. And so again, the trade war can't go on forever without countries paying the price for it, and that is the United States as well in terms of inflation, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, I'm optimistic that a deal will be struck, and of course, I don't see the reciprocal tariffs being placed on India lasting for a long time, that is the 50%, and I don't see even 25% lasting for a long time. So I think we'll get, a deal. It's just a matter of time.
Okay. Peter, also now as far as, this softer tone that Trump seems to have struck vis-a-vis India, do you believe it's something that will last now?
I think so. It's to the best interest of everyone that these types of situations come to fruition in a positive way. And so I think so.
All right. Appreciate you joining us, Peter Cardillo, with your perspective on that story. Now, marking 5 years of Abraham Accords, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Israel. In a bilateral meeting earlier today, Rubio said that Washington will give its ally unwavering support in the Gaza war and has called for Hamas's eradication. Netanyahu said Rubio's visit was a clear message. The United States stood with Israel and praised President Donald Trump for his backing, calling him the greatest friend that Israel has ever had. Let's listen in to what Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, had to say.
And yes, I think it's appropriate. We're here on the 5th anniversary of that historic accord, which really, imagine, despite the difficulties the region has confronted over the last few years, how much more difficult they would have been had the Abraham Accords not been in place. And we're obviously incredibly grateful as well, just from the perspective of the United States, to Morocco and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. There are other countries that have expressed an interest, and one of the to being a part of this, and one of the great promises of the era is the ability under President Trump's second term to be able to build upon the foundation of the Abraham Accords and expand it to more countries who want to join in something like this. And so it's also part of our focus.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State and Israeli President have also met in Jerusalem. Herzog commended on the success of the Abraham Accords during the meeting. Rubio joined Herzog in calling for the expansion of the landmark normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab states. Herzog recalled the historic moment when the accords were signed on the White House lawn in 2020 under the auspices of then President Donald Trump. And that's all the time we have on today's broadcast. Stay tuned to NewsX World. Much more on the other side.